Gaywyck by Vincent Verga. Publisher Allison Books, Los Angeles, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 12. The first days without them, I endured the anxiety of separation. Keyes appeared at none of the meals. Denver's was silent at most. Mr. O'Shea served up leftovers. Pity to waste all that fancy food. And no one complained. Brian, too, was subdued, baking whole wheat loaves and plain pound cakes for tea. He was experiencing the loss as intensely as the rest of us. Danough had managed to spend hours with him, transplanting orchids and starting an herb garden in pots. Only Ambrose welcomed the peace. "At my age, so much excitement is hard on the kidneys." The snow, at first exhilarating, was now like so much sand packing up tightly into the house. I devoured Dumas' novels, one after the other, while Cale slept unmoving on the bed by my side. I resumed my work in the libraries. I finished grouping the books according to language and subject, prose and poetry, and was ready to begin my filing cards as soon as I collected the stray volumes from the rooms that did not have special collections. It was a pleasant task. It took me into those apartments I had not visited since my first tour with Denver's, giving me the opportunity to look at the paintings again. The house was mysteriously silent as I made my way down the dim corridors. The snow outside muted a sound while heightening color. Though it was early morning, I carried a lamp. The heavy winter draperies were drawn. I collected 7 volumes in the second-floor left-wing rooms, from bureau drawers and closet shelves where guests had deposited them many years before. Stuck into a leather-bound collection of Poe's poems was a letter written in a large, sprawling hand dated 24 July, 1884. My dearest Pym, alas, all is not well in this kingdom by the sea. In fact, things could not be worse, and you were lucky to stay out of it this year. I wish I could manage my money better, because this is really hard on the spirit and too hard a way to earn it. Money, I mean, not spirit. She is worse than ever, if you can believe it. He should put her away, but why should he care? He never sees her except for an odd Saturday and Sunday, when he spends his time in the ocean with those monsters and Snooty Stephen, who's as bad as ever. The weather is beautiful. It is a relief to get out of this stinking city. I can't tell you how awful she is, not that I need to. If I ever go crazy, no modeling coddling for me. But I'm not rich. I don't have anything to worry about. Right, Pim? They are calling me to play croquet. God help me. The really rich are really different. I have to say that. The food is tops, but it's pretty hard to swallow with Ophelia talking to the mashed potatoes. I'm only fooling. It's not that bad. The good news is we are doing 12th Night, and I'm Arsenio. The monsters are the twins. Clever, huh? And Denver's is directing. It's gonna be good. The rehearsals are the best part of the day. It is fun to learn some lines again. Not that it's been all that long, but you know what I mean. If you are free, maybe you can come out and see me? We are scheduled for the first Sunday in August. Hermine is coming out to do the sets, and Brooks is supplying the costumes like last year. It isn't 14th Street, but it's better than nothing. Did you get the part in the new Balesco? They're all screaming for me. I've got to go. More later. I miss you. XXXXXXX. Margie. I wondered what happened to Margie. I wondered what happened to Pym. The guests' relatives were paid actors. I crumpled the letter into my pocket, planning to feed it to the first fire I happened upon. Did Cormac play as well as Danough does? I interrupted my lessons to ask a sleepy Keyes. Cormac had perfect pitch. Danough has a touch of the poet. If I played a piece through twice, Cormac could play it back. He lacked discipline, dear. He could not practice. He was mercurial. Each reading was different. One minute he was happy, the next sad and gloomy. I often thought he had no form of his own. It was what made him so ravishing. You could shape him into anything you desired. Of course, dear, that was all my illusion. And dangerous to boot. They were themselves, but needed each other the way goldfish are separate, but need the sea. Poor analogy. Sorry, dear. I'm old and very tired of all this. Being malicious is a terrible strain. I blinked at the non sequitur. He appeared flustered and closed the piano. I was curiously dismissed. It took me the rest of the morning to gather the books scattered throughout the right wing rooms on the second floor and the left wing of the third. After lunch, I planned to finish the search and begin typewriting the cards. When I returned to my closet to prepare for luncheon, I discovered Margie's letter in my pocket. Instead of burning it, I flattened it out into my journal. It started snowing after luncheon. Denver's excused himself immediately to resume work on his project. I wrote in my journal for an hour before walking through the remaining rooms, as I had intended. I expected to spend only a short while in the right wing. Most of the areas was library too. The art room and Key's quarters. I found one stray. They went into the art room to peruse those shelves for misplaced miscellany. I felt guilty being there. The case full of Lepidoptera attracted me, as did the black metal cabinet marked photography. But I was uncomfortable and wanted to forget my transgressions in that room. Yet I was determined to leave no books scattered about like leaves after a windstorm. So I continued browsing the shelves, concentrating intensely on titles to avoid wondering what Ruby was doing on the other side of the wall in a room accessible only by means of a spiral staircase hidden in the basement. A room with windows sealed closed by Boston ivy. I looked about the room. A large door with a brass key in its lock was centered in the connecting wall between me and Ruby's quarters. I walked directly to the door and without hesitation tried the knob. "May wasps swarm and hornets rage," I mumbled, yanking it open to reveal a storeroom. "Sneak and ye shall find a closet. My smart young snoop," I added guiltily. I could see a small stack of books on a shelf too high for me to reach without assistance. At least I haven't disgraced myself for nothing. I can lie and say I did it for the books. Taking a low stool from beside the photography cabinet, I stepped inside the closet below the back shelf. I stretched my hands up for the books, unaware that the door behind me was quietly closing, until the key turned in the lock with a deafening click. I spun around on the stool. The shock of the sudden darkness and the realization that someone had just locked me into the closet made me lose my balance. I fell backward, slamming my head against the shelf, but not, thank God, tumbling to the floor. Overcome by nausea from the blow, I sat down on the stool. Was this someone's idea of a prank? I was not smiling. I must have sat there collecting my senses for fully 5 minutes before realizing I was no longer in the dark. Glancing over my right shoulder, I saw that the walls no longer formed a corner. In the fall, my head had opened another secret door. Swiveling on the stool, I peeked through the crevice. A diaphanous white fabric hung in front of my face. Using my left hand, I pressed the walls further apart. The purdah rustled. The space on the other side was crowded with white dresses. Squeezing in among them, I peered out into a room bright with winter light, warmed by a crackling fire, and colored completely in cheerful pastels. Stretched out on a divan, her back toward me, a silver-haired woman reclined in the sunlight. She fidgeted nervously with a white shawl, which I assumed had been recently removed from the closet in which I now stood. She'd left the door ajar, and the light had shown me the way to her. This was her sitting room. A stunning fragonard took my attention. I took 2 paces toward it. She turned to face me. "No, one word can express what I felt at that moment. Rested, calm, drenched in snow-heightened sunlight was the face I had seen in the mirror. The face of my mother. Yet not her face. The face ravaged by the merciless claws of time and by unspeakable memories. The face of my mother, not as I had last seen her, but as I would see it, perhaps in 20 years. I gaped in stupefied amazement. Was this an illusion? The product of a deranged mind? She smiled at me. She spoke in a soft, high-pitched voice with only the vaguest timbre resemblance to my mother's sound. She spoke without surprise at my presence in her sitting room. I thought you would never come. I am pining for you. The birds were discussing us this morning, which was what brought you to mind, though you're never far away. Will you stay to tea? If you don't, I shan't be able to mention your visit. The last time I spoke of Cormac to Ruby, she became quite cross. Don't tell her I was here, please. Don't mention it to her. Very well, but I am weary of this secrecy. It reduces one so... When will she return? She left for the tea things a moment before you arrived. Didn't you pass her in the hall? She opened her eyes very wide. They were my mother's eyes. I had to sit down. I walked shakily to the chair opposite her. Don't fret. We'll hear her at the door. Why have you cut your hair so short? Mama will be very angry. Did they make you do it? Who? The gypsies, of course. Come sit here beside me and tell me all about it. I never tire of hearing it. You know, did I wake you? I'm sorry if I woke you. I wasn't asleep. I never sleep. I moved to her side on the divan. She took my hand in hers. It's such a trying life here. I do my best, but Mary Rose would be grateful for your help. Carmack, that evil Stephen. Are you coming to live with us again? No, I can't. Not yet. Well, I will content myself with an occasional visit from you and the boys. For one as weak and as delicate as I, too much strain is not good either. I'm happy to see you. The resemblance was uncanny. She was more breathless and fluttery, more traditionally feminine. In gesture and behavior, more agitated, high-strung, and tense, with noticeably more cultivated manners and style, yet there was a flickering half-smile and overall shape to her presence and the structure of her body to confuse my senses and convince me the similarities were more than coincidental. I barely heard what she said. Why are you staring at me like that? Has my hair come down and back? No, forgive me. You remind me of someone. I didn't mean to stare. I don't mean to be rude. I remind you of someone. How glorious. That's always so delightful. Who is the fortunate being? I can't recall. Which, I guess, is why I was staring. She became distracted suddenly, and I feared she was going to cry. You must be happy when the vines shed their leaves, I said, clutching at a distraction. The sunlight is wonderful. Yes, but it makes me sad. It's like a net. The years literally blow away. You understand? I said I did. She seemed relieved. I asked after her health. While she spoke, I wondered if, like me, she had no other place to go. How had she come to Danough's attention? She became involved in a convoluted explanation of her invalid state. Straining to follow, I did not hear Ruby until a door slammed in one of the other rooms. I stood to take my leave at a run, placing a fleeting kiss on her forehead. Please come visit, dear. I will. I promise. Soon. I'll stay for tea. Rushing into the closet, I yanked the door closed just as Ruby's voice was heard praising Mr. O'Shea for another extra special tea. Crumpets. Scenes from Dickens and Thackeray rose before me. I ceased struggling with the clothing that entangled me and was tempted to reconsider the specter's offer, but thought better of it. I groped my way back to the wall and passed to the other side, grateful her shoes were kept elsewhere. I pressed the wall nearly shut, taking great care not to lock it. Sitting on the stool, I pondered my predicament. How was I to get out of the art room closet? If I became hysterical and shouted for assistance, Ruby would hear me. If I stomped my feet against the door, Keys might hear me and think a thunderstorm was approaching. Beethoven, of course, would notice nothing. Perhaps when I didn't appear for tea, Denver's alarmed, would organize a search led by Cale. As if materialized by my thoughts, Cale howled outside the door, stooping to peer through the keyhole. I saw him sitting in front of me, distress evident in his round eyes. He howled again, demanding entry. Cale, trust me, I would if I could, but I can't. I pressed my mouth against the keyhole, planning to instruct him to go for help. Knowing better, but hopeful nonetheless. When the door sprang open, I toppled out like so much baggage, bruising my nose when it thudded against the wooden floor. The cat bounded backward, horrified, not entertained. He scurried from the room. The door had been unlocked. The key had been removed. Had I not looked through the empty hole? Whoever locked me in now held the key in his possession. This is a problem, I thought, still sitting on the floor. Whenever I visit her, I'll risk incarceration. Well, that is a chance I will have to take. As saying, I went down to tea, hungrier than usual. A letter waited by my place. A letter from Timothy Goodbody. With Denver's permission, I opened it at the table. It was a short note, written on legal yellow pad paper. My dearest Robbie, the district attorney is making his opening statement to the jury. As he reiterates the moral question at every trial, I can write now without fear of missing anything crucial. Mortimer is paying attention, believe it or not. This is the only place I can steal time to write. How much I enjoyed my visit with you at Gaywyck. You must come to New York soon and visit with us. Again, thank you for your companionship. Fondly, Goodbody. A postscript in a different hand was appended. A P.S. Ditto here. Love, Mortimer. P.P.S. He has such a way with words. T.G. P.P.P.S. Must always have the last word. E.M. Now we have done it. The D.A. is all excited. He hasn't seen such animation at this table since our first day in court. He thinks his rhetorical brilliance has generated this note passing. I find that endearing. Don't you, T.G.? Yes, E.M. I do. However, the court awaits our pleasure. The show must go on, and the State versus Emory. Remember? Goodbye, Robbie. Thanks again. T.G. He's right, as always. Goodbye for now, new friend, E.M. When I finished the note, I gave it to Denver's. He, too, had received one more restrained than mine, but warm and very affectionate. We laughed over their antics, but he insisted that despite their levity, they were two of the finest, most successful lawyers in the city. The day after Thanksgiving, I had found myself alone with them in Library 1. I felt comfortable and had no compunctions about asking personal questions. I managed several leading ones. They showed no reserve with their answers. Goodbody and Mortimer were introduced practically at birth. Their fathers were Wall Street financiers who owned neighboring houses on Fifth Avenue and belonged to the same club. Their boys played together and at age 5 visited Gaywyck for 1 week during the summer of 1874. Never having seen a black child before, the twins were fascinated by Mortimer, who also spoke several languages, and they readily accepted his wiry blonde friend. The four formed an amiable team from the first. Cormac sensed the strong bond between the two visitors. He treated them as equals. He rarely became violent or unpleasant, restraining himself from any overt acts of hostility. For the two of them, they could not be separated, were stronger than he alone, and Danough, since Their combined strength always sided with them. The visits were a continued success. During the annual Christmas recess in the city, the twins lunched with their friends at one house or the other and spent a day in shared amusements. When they reached puberty, the visits abruptly ended. Cormac was too demanding, too aggressive, and ferocious when refused. We'd go back to town unnerved. Then he hurt Tim's left eye. We were just kids, curious and excitable. Cormac was never a child, Eugene. We found that out the hard way. He never played a day in his life. He didn't know how to play. He went for the jugular. When he was crossed, I doubt if Danough ever refused him anything. I know his parents never did. We were probably the only ones who said no to him, and I paid for it. In the cave? Yes, in the cave. You know the cave? Mortimer asked. I nodded. There was a hesitation. What did he want? I asked, seeing the cave crowded with the 4 young bodies. What he always wanted, what he couldn't get enough of. Love. I said no. I loved Mortimer. He hit me so hard with his fist I had to wear a patch for nearly a year. What happened after that? There was no after that. We never came back. Our parents sent us to school together that fall, and we were always too busy in the summers and not available in the winters. We wrote to Danough, even arranged secret meetings with him in town over Christmas vacation for a time, but he could never lie convincingly, and the whole thing was too hard for him. We drifted apart, but we loved him too much to ever lose him completely. Mortimer interrupted. After Cormac's death, we saw as much of him as we could manage while we were in law school. We spent our summers with him in Paris. He's our dearest friend. Here is where Keyes would quote the old sage, son of Sirach. A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter. He who finds one finds a treasure, and he'd be right. That's the way we feel about Danough. When I asked about Mary Rose Gaylord, they stalled before Mortimer answered. She's dead, you know? And then Goodbody added as though sharing his thoughts. I liked her. She was gentle and loving, at least that's how I remember her. She had a difficult time. Gaylord was a remarkable man. I loved being with him. He was easy and kind. He'd play with us for hours. I think he was the most beautiful man I ever have seen. More beautiful than Danough? I asked incredulously. No, Mortimer answered, chuckling. Perhaps not. I nodded, relieved, unable to visualize a more perfect form. Well, Goodbody continued, as beautiful, Jean, but darker and bigger. Mortimer laughed, about to reply, then he glanced at me and changed his mind. Instead, he said, I always thought he was the perfect father. Danough says he was, for the most part. That surprised me. I imagined him aloof and removed from his 2 sons, unable to communicate with them and too self-absorbed to try. I had imagined him locked away in his study with Stephen, always unavailable. I had imagined him the image of my father. Evidently, I had been wrong. Holding their amusing letter in my hands, I reread the last words over and over. Goodbye for now, new friend. I knew they were speaking from the heart, and I was happy. Denver sat opposite, sipping wine engrossed in the New York Times. I had a surge of affection for him. As though conscious of it, he glanced over to the top of the page and smiled at me. I folded the letter. Friendship engulfed me. And the dearest friendship of all I knew would soon be mine. We were served crumpets. Ah, Denver's said. Now we are certain winter has come. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.